He's a retired Navy SEAL turned author of thrillers. And he joins us today on the Brewmance podcast to talk about all those things. And he's an avid outdoorsman. And he's got a better beard game than we do, Mike Russell.
Very much.
His name is Jack Carr. Jack, appreciate you hanging out with us here on the Brewmance. My name is Rob Hunter. His name is Mike Russell. And Jack's new book is called The Devil's Hand. We'll get to that here in just a few minutes because he's going to be virtually in Scottsdale on Monday, the 12th of April at the Poison Pen Bookstore, a great independent bookstore in Scottsdale where I've been many times for many book signings. So, Jack, I wanted to start with you because I noticed that you have quite the bio when it comes to traveling the world, but in a different fashion. So Mike knows I like to go to Italy. I've been to Japan. You did a little different. You did it through the military, and you have been all over the world in probably the least desirable places. So how has that shaped you into the author that you are now?
Sure. Well, you did it a lot smarter than I did. I mean, that's certainly the way to go for those listening, particular your kids that are making choices. That might be the way to go. It's I need to get back to some of those spots, but the time in Iraq and Afghanistan certainly influenced my stories, but not in the way that I thought when I started. So I have 4 novels out now. The first one is called The Terminal List. They're turning it into a series on Amazon right now. Chris Pratt starring, Antoine Fuqua is directing it right now. They're on set making that happen. But when I sat down to write, I thought it was just going to be a story. I was going to write. It's going to be, great. It's going to be an escape for people. I won't have to ask too many questions to other people about guns and knives and that sort of thing because of my background. But it became readily apparent that what I was going to infuse in the story were the feelings and emotions behind certain events that I was involved with downrange. Not the actual events themselves just plopped into a narrative, but the feelings and emotions applied to a fictional narrative. And that became, I didn't really realize that as I wrote the 1-page executive summary, as I wrote the outline, but as soon as I started to turn that into the actual story, when I sat down to write, that became very apparent that it was going to be a much more personal writing experience than I anticipated at the outset. And I think that's why it resonated with Simon & Schuster, because they see thousands of these books every year. And when they saw mine come across their desk, it stood out for some reason. And there's some reason that they are resonating with readers. And I think it's that emotion and that feeling that's just so raw, so primal, so visceral, because I don't have to find a Navy SEAL sniper to interview and ask him what it was like to go into Ramadi in 2005, 2006, and then take that information and filter it through whatever biases and experiences I have and then apply it to a fictional character. It just comes raw from me right into that fictional character, right into that fictional narrative. So there's no, there's no filters in place there. So I think that's why these have resonated with people.
Now, it doesn't seem like the standard career path to go into the military, to become a SEAL, to become a sniper, and then to become an author, especially a 4-book series. And we're talking to Jack Carr, The Devil's Hand. So tell us about that journey. And I mean, you can start as far back as you want to go, and why you joined the military. What sniperdom? What brought you to sniperdom and then to authorship?
Yeah, so what's interesting is that now I do on Instagram. I'm at Jack Carr USA on Instagram, and I do these little vignettes when it's an author's birthday, someone who's influential to me along my path. And when I go back and research some of these guys, particularly the guys that were writing in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, and I look and I'm surprised that like a lot of them have backgrounds, particularly in World War II. And so it's fascinating to me, guys that I didn't even know had these backgrounds, like Ian Fleming. He created James Bond, of course. So he has a background there in World War II. Like all these guys that I didn't really realize had this real life background do. So it's not as uncommon as one might think. Maybe it is today, but back then we had so many more people serving, especially in World War II. It affected so many different segments of not just our society, but the world as a whole. But for me, I knew there was 2 things in life I was going to do, and I was going to serve my country in uniform, and then I was going to write thrillers. And I didn't realize how connected those were, but now looking back, with the benefit of hindsight, they're definitely connected. But growing up, my grandfather was killed in World War II. So I grew up with pictures of him and his squadron. He flew a plane called the Corsair, which is the one that had the gull wings that would fold up on aircraft carriers. So I had pictures of him and his squadron, the silk maps they gave aviators back then, his medals, his wings, like that sort of thing. And then there was a show on TV called Black Sheep Squadron with Robert Conrad playing Pappy Boynton, who flew the Corsair, just like my grandfather.
Nice.
So I was with my dad, and Robert Conrad was out there, and he's hard drinking, fighting. Like it was, I love this show, and I love that guy. I got to meet Robert Conrad Conrad. I got to meet Pappy Boynton as a kid, and it was just amazing. So I knew I was going to the military. And then I found out about age 7 what SEALs were. And I found out about that through a movie called The Frogman, which is an old black and white film focused on World War II, and shows these guys climbing up over these beaches and placing explosives on obstacles. And I remember asking my dad about, like, who are these guys? And he said, like, ask your mother, so and she was a librarian. And so we went down to the local library, did some research, and found out, hey, these guys are SEALs, or they were the precursors of SEALs. And this BUDS training, the SEAL training, is touted as some of the toughest ever devised by a modern military. And these guys are elite special operations warriors, some of the best in the world. And I just took that as a 7-year-old kid. That's what I was doing. I'm going into the SEAL teams. So everything I did, whether I was playing soccer, lacrosse, running cross country, getting into martial arts, getting into boxing, later getting into Brazilian jiu-jitsu, whatever it was all in preparation to go into the military, to include reading. So with a mom who's a librarian and growing up with this love of books, I was reading that nonfiction. And back then, you could read almost everything on special operations in the early 80s, mid 80s, late 80s. Today I can't even imagine going down the rabbit hole online. You couldn't possibly sift through everything, but back then you could, because it was all physical. And I also naturally gravitated towards the fiction, towards novels, towards books whose authors had protagonists with backgrounds I wanted in real life one day. So it's Tom Clancy, it's Nelson DeMille, it's A.J. Cornell, it's J.C. Pollock, it's Mark Olden. It's these guys who had SEALs or Army Special Forces or CIA guys as their protagonists. Typically they had Vietnam experience back then, but I have such great memories of reading these books and then knowing, hey, one day after my time in the military, I'm going to write fiction just like the kind I'm enjoying now. So I listened to both those callings, military service and writing, and they actually became self-supportive that I was getting out, because I had that foundation from reading all these people. I had the academic study of warfare, terrorism, counterinsurgency from a very early age. That's never stopped. And then the experience in Iraq and Afghanistan on top of that. So it all kind of came together at the right time and place as I started writing.
See, there's that world travel experience right there. Iraq and Afghanistan during a war. Who doesn't want to go do that?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I noticed on the back of the book too, because this is the brand new one. It's called The Devil's Hand. And again, Jack Carr is going to be virtually at the Poisoned Pen on Monday. So make sure you check it out. My favorite author is Lee Child. On the very back of this book, it said, seriously good. I mean, seriously. Like, what does that mean as an author to get accolades from someone like Lee Child? And I noticed on your Instagram the other day, another of my favorites was Mitch Rapp, who passed a few years back. But you had mentioned that he had an influence on you too. So to get accolades from Lee and to get to know Mitch prior to his passing, to be able to be talked about in that same realm, how cool is that for you?
Yeah, no, it's also, I'm friends with people that I idolized growing up. So I talked to, just this morning, I'm talking to David Morrell, who created the character Rambo back in 1972. Now we talk at least once a week. Stephen Hunter, who wrote, he's written a lot, but the Bob Lee Swagger series is probably what people are most familiar with. It starts with Point of Impact. We talk all the time as well. And Stephen Pressfield, Gates of Fire, Legend of Bagger Vance, Afghan Campaign, talk to him all the time. So these people that I looked up to growing up are, we're now in the same industry, and it's very supportive. That's what I found. And my first really experience was with Vince Flynn, who created the character Mitch Rapp, which all but one of his books feature Mitch Rapp. The first one, Term Limits, doesn't. And Term Limits is just they're all incredible. But I met Vince at SHOT Show, which is an industry show in Vegas that highlights all the latest gear and equipment and that sort of thing. And it was focused on kind of outdoor stuff in the past, but around 2003-04, it started to shift to this more tactical focus. And now the tactical room, when I first, was about the size of this office when I first went in 2003 or 4, and now it's like the whole show. But I met him as SHOT Show was closing down at the end of the day. He was signing books there. I waited till the end, went up and introduced myself, and I didn't tell him that I was going to write one day, because this was like, I want to say it was 2009-ish, somewhere in there. And we walked through the whole SHOT Show, and people that have been there, it's hard to get out at the end of the day. If you're like in the middle of that maze of chaos, and then you work your way out to the front as you're kind of like a herd of cattle trying to get out to this place. And we talked the whole time. And he was just so kind to me, treated me like he was just such a normal, good guy. Incredible. And then I met Lee Child, and this is closer to when I'm getting out of the military. So I have a couple months left in the military, 4 or 5 months left, writing my novel. I have a few months left till I think I'm going to be done with it. And I meet him once again at SHOT Show. A friend calls me, Tom Davin, who's now one of the co-CEOs of Black Rifle Coffee. He was at
Nice.
at the time, and he's just an incredible guy, former Marine. But he calls me and he says, "Hey, come down to the 511 party. Lee Child's here," because Tom knew I was writing this novel. And so off I went. And I don't think people at that party at the time were big readers, because Lee Child was just there just by himself kind of. And there was a couple other people in a corner, and then me and Tom Davin. And so Tom introduced me. And what I remember most about that conversation with Lee Child is that he treated me, I this time I did tell him, I said, I'm writing a novel. It's anyway, just told him like a little bit of the backstory. And I remember that he treated me exactly like I was a #1 New York Times bestselling author.
Wow.
And still in the military, haven't published anything. How many people tell you they're writing a novel or want to write a novel? Now I know, but especially for him, like everybody must tell him that they have an idea or they want to write something someday or whatever it is. And he treated me like we were peers. Lee Child, one of the most successful authors of all time. And so I've never forgotten that. And
very cool.
And I also reminded him, because he did say, "Hey, if you ever write this thing, let me know. I'd like to give it a read." And I was like, "Bing, okay." Yeah. So I did.
Unreal. That's crazy.
Hey, Lee, remember when? And we met up a couple times. But yeah, I'm that kid you talked to, and remember when you said you'd blurb this thing? So anyway, he's been fantastic, and what an amazing guy who just retired this year. Yeah, that was kind of a shock, I think, to everyone, and he's turning that series over to his brother. So Andrew Child moving forward, taking on that series. So that'll be cool to see how that plays out, and what an amazing two guys right there. Yeah, incredible. So yeah, I feel very fortunate to have run into some really interesting people over the years, and everyone's been so great.
So SEAL sniper, author, 4-time author, you're writing these thrillers. Now, there had to have been in all this advice that you're getting, obviously in your SEAL training and your sniper training, there's been very important do's and don'ts. So I'm going to ask you on the military side and on the writing side, especially with the mentorships that you've had on the writing side as well. As far as advice goes, what's the #1 do and the #1 don't in the military? What's the #1 do and #1 don't in writing novels?
Well, the military one's going to seem very simplistic, and that's by design. Don't do anything stupid.
There you go.
That's pretty much. Yeah,
I'm writing that down. I haven't had
that pretty much covers quite a bit. So so that is definitely it on the military side of the house. And the do's on the military side of the house, at least on the special operations side of the house, which was my very slim part of experience in the military, it's adapt. You have got this is a game of constant adaptation. We are a learning organization. We have to be, because the enemy certainly is, and whoever really adapts quicker than their opponent is usually the one that comes out on top. And we're fighting an enemy that is very agile. They are not a gigantic bureaucracy like we are. Even in the SEAL teams, even in special operations, it's still a bureaucracy. Maybe not as big as the rest of the military, but it's still a bureaucracy. So that's it. It's adapting. So don't do anything stupid. And remember, we're always a learning organization. Always adapt.
I like it. Mike, I almost forgot. I have a beer sitting here. I know that Jack is not, because Jack's actually going to the gun store after this interview. So I don't know if you have a beer, Mike, but I'm going to crack my beer open.
I mean, I can go get one. I mean, this is pretty. I mean, we do here at the studio have a beer fridge, so I can't. So awesome. I can't definitely find one.
I gotta get one here in the office. Actually, I think I have one.
So I'm being the bad influence today. But I wanted to
hold on. But before we get to, I want the author side. I want the author side. I want the #1 do and the #1 don't on the author side.
I think they're the same. I think they're the same. Just like life in general. But there's no really set of rules for writing. So for me, it's just listening to that calling, answering that call, and trying to make these novels as primal and visceral and as I possibly can, and give people, people are trusting me with their time. So they're not going to get that back. And so I take that very seriously, whether it's they're going to spend a few days in the novel, a week and a half on that novel. They're going to spend 10, 11, 12, 13 hours listening to the audiobook read by Ray Porter, who's amazing, by the way, playing Darkseid in the Snyder cut of Justice League, which just came out a couple of weeks ago. Cool. So people are trusting me with that time. So, and they're not going to get that back, and they get to decide how they're going to spend that time that they have on this planet. So I put a lot of time, energy, and effort and thought, not just into the stories, but on anything that I do. So whether it's the Instagram post gets just as much thought as a paragraph in one of my novels, because I want to, people are trusting me with that time, then it's an honor and it's a responsibility. So what I owe them is the requisite thought into anything that I do. So point being, there's not really a do and don't as far as writing, as far as there's some great advice. I think it was Elmore Leonard wrote it. He said, take out the parts that people skip. Okay. That's a good advice right there.
That is really good advice.
Yeah. All right. That's great.
Yeah.
Well, and you said always adapt. And so through your 4 novels, has each one has there been an adaptation to the next one that something you learned in the previous novel forced a change in that in your mind's eye as it moved forward?
Well, hopefully they're getting better with each one. That would be the goal, obviously, not just for me, but I think for any author, as you continue to study your craft, just like get on the mat in jiu-jitsu, you're going to learn something. You're going to win or you're going to learn. Same thing in boxing ring. You're going to get in there, you're going to put that ring time in. When you get out of that ring, you'll have learned something. You'll gotten a little bit better for the next time. So writing is just like that, just like anything else in life. So the first one is really a story of revenge without constraint. I have very distinct themes for each one of these because I find that it keeps me on track as I'm writing. And I have a little yellow sticky that I put on my computer that has the theme of the novel written there. And I got that from Stephen Pressfield. The first one, redemption, which is true believer, a story of redemption, of learning to live again, identifying that next mission in life, that next passion in life. And then the third one, it's more than just a one word because I found out that I misinterpreted something Stephen Pressfield said. So he didn't really say one word. He was telling a story about a playwright that would have one sentence that would have the theme of their play. And in my head, when I heard him say that on Rogan, I thought, one word. Okay, next to his typewriter, I'm going to put it on my computer and it'll guide me. And it really did help because there's been very few edits content-wise from Simon & Schuster throughout all 4 of the novels.
Wow.
But yeah, that third one is the one I wanted to write, Savage Son. I wanted to write that one since I was in 6th grade when I read The Most Dangerous Game by Richard Connell. It's a 1924 short story. And I always knew that one day I'd write a novel that played tribute to that short story. So that was Savage Son. And then in this latest one, I really wanted to take a breath and I wanted to think about something that I contemplated while I was in uniform and continue to think about today as an author and as a citizen, which is what has the enemy learned by watching us on the field of battle for the last 20 years at war? Essentially, we've been playing poker and they've been circling, looking at our cards, looking at how we play those cards, taking those lessons, applying them to future battle plans. So I thought, what have they learned? And as I'm writing that formed the basis. So if I was Iran, if I was China, if I was Russia, if I was North Korea, if I was a super empowered individual, if I was a terrorist organization, what would I have learned and what I've applied to my future battle plan? So that formed the basis. And I outlined this in August of 2019. So I'm on my way to and from Russia. So I leave my computer behind. I leave my phone behind because I'm going to do research for Savage Son in Kamchatka Peninsula, just south of Siberia. And I didn't want who knows what people have sent me over the years email wise. I didn't want Russian intelligence to be sucking all the stuff out of my computer or confiscating it. Who knows? So I just brought my notepad and I outlined this whole book, The Devil's Hand. And then when I got home, I started researching infectious diseases, the weaponization of infectious diseases from the end of World War II up through today. What did the Japanese do in World War II? What did the Germans do in World War II? Where did that data and research go after the war? Did it inform the bioweapons program of the United States and the Soviet Union? What are the conventions that we signed in the 70s on bioweapons? What does that mean? So I'm studying all this, and then COVID hits. And then
wow.
So I was hypersensitive to it, but at the same time, the whole basis of this novel is what's the enemy learning? And I'm in the enemy's shoes. So now I'm looking at COVID. What are they learning from our response to COVID? What are they learning from our response to a summer of civil unrest in our cities? What are they learning from a very contentious political season and election cycle? Well, they're not just looking at these things with passing interest. They are taking lessons, drawing these lessons and applying them to their battle plan. So as I'm writing, things are happening during a very pivotal year in our nation's history. And the enemy's looking, they're watching, they're adapting, learning. So I'm incorporating this stuff real time as I'm writing this novel. So it was fascinating time to be exploring that theme through the eyes of the enemy.
And I noticed that too, because I'm up to chapter 4. So I just got the book the other day, like 2 days ago. So I started reading it last night to get ready for this. And I'm already hooked. I'm like, I would rather skip work today and just read the book, but unfortunately you can't do that. But it does tie in. It does tie in well. The Devil's Hand, Jack Carr, the author of that, is a retired Navy SEAL. Because one of the other things that gripped us throughout this country was fear. I think for a lot of people are still freaked out, don't want to go outside. So in tying it in with the devil's hand and with your SEAL training, if someone were to come up to you as a retired Navy SEAL, like, what advice do you have on dealing with fear? What would you tell them?
Well, when we think about that in terms of this last year, let's look at it in those terms. There's a couple different ways you can go about having dealt and dealing going forward. And really, it's identifying what caused that fear. So let's take it back to March of last year, April of last year. Were you worried financially about not having a job? Well, if you were, then what steps have you taken over this last year to fix that, to alleviate that fear, so it's not it's not wasting bandwidth the next time something like this happens, whether it's a pandemic, whether it's a natural disaster, whether it's civil unrest, no matter what it is, there has to be this foundation built so that you can adapt to those different changing problem sets, and you can allocate bandwidth towards solving those problems that maybe you can't anticipate ahead of time. But guess what we can anticipate? Well, having this financial foundation. What else? Oh, were you worried that going down to the supermarket, they might not have some, they might not have any meat on the shelf, or the canned goods might be all gone? Well, guess what? Now's the time to take those lessons and apply them and get some food. Put that away, just so you know. So now you're not worried about that. Do you have a water filter? Were you worried that someone maybe wasn't going to be able to go in and keep the water on, go into your house, and you turn it on? Maybe it comes out all brown and nasty. Well, do you have a water filter now? Do you have fire extinguishers so the kids know how to use them? Does your babysitter know how to use them? So all those things that came into your mind when you were in that situation, when you felt a little scared, a little apprehensive, maybe not as prepared as one could have been for the future. Well, guess what? Now's the time. Actually, we're past the time, but you can still make some changes, and you can still be more prepared going forward, so that when something does happen that you need to focus on, that you couldn't have anticipated ahead of time, all your bandwidth is on solving that problem, rather than, hey, what's my family going to eat tomorrow? Hey, do we have enough water here? Like, what's going? Oh gosh, like all those sorts of things. And there's a couple different ways to frame it, because as parents, our kids, they're noticing what's going on, not just by listening, but by our body language, by our tone of voice. So they could either have mom and dad in the kitchen, whispering, like, seeing that worry, sensing that worry, and they're going to feel that, and they're going to, are we going to have a dinner tomorrow night? Why are mom and dad so worried? What are they talking about? His job? Was this? So they're having all these questions. Or you can be in that same situation and bring those kids in and be like, hey, you know what? We were not as prepared as we could have been as a family for this, but guess what we're going to do going forward? X, Y, and Z. And hey, let's go in the backyard. We're going to build a little fire in our barbecue, and I'm going to show you how to put it out with this fire extinguisher, so that now you know how to do that, and you know where it is. And so you use it, all these things as they're teachable moments, which is the word people like to use, but it's true. They are. And you can, so just the exact same situation, just the way you handle it can be so different for all of those around you, not just your kids. It could be for neighbors, other people in your circle as well. So the most important thing is to make those changes. And we have a great year last year to look back on, and you can go and identify where you were, what you were doing, when you started worrying about your job, when you started worrying about how much food you had in the house, and whatever it might be. Well, now's your time to make those changes.
Is that how you dealt with, to get specific, is that how because you said adaptability, is that how you approach war situations? Because now we're elevating to life and death. So is that sort of, okay, you go in, you fight the battle, and you were a sniper, so you do what you need to do, and then you say, okay, you do an after action report, in other words.
Right. That's right. You come right back. The first thing you do is a hot wash. So you bring everybody together and you talk about what went right, what went wrong, how you can do it better next time. No one's talking about rank. No one's thinking about those sorts of things. You're just getting it all out on the table, because that's what you owe that team, and you owe the people that are coming next to pass those lessons on to them, so they're not learning these same lessons in blood. So you come back, you do that hot wash, and that tactical level hot wash, and then as a leader, you take that and you put it on paper, and then you have that after action report that you can then send out to other people. So people that are back in the United States getting ready to come over are like, oh, look what we need here. We need these kind of breaching charges, because on this kind of a wall, XYZ didn't work quite as well. So whatever that is, you're passing that off to make us all stronger and going forward. It's all about adaptability, all about learning those lessons, but not just learning them, then taking those and applying them going forward. So you're turning that into wisdom.
And that's for anything. I mean, that's absolutely exactly what you said could be applied to anything. I was even thinking of Rob and I's business and what we do. You can apply it to that. You can apply it to writing novels. You can apply it to the next novel. I'm sure when the first one was published, you already had the second one in the works, but then you go back and read the first one and think, okay, I'm learning from this, and I'm going to put something in that. I think that's just insanely valuable wisdom.
Yeah, you have to always got to learn, always got to do it better the next time around. Absolutely, no matter what it is in life.
What about leadership? And I'm going to add politics in because part of what you write in The Devil's Hand, I just got to the part where you introduced the new president, and he has a background, which I haven't got to. He has a secret, but I haven't got to the secret yet. Ooh. But you paint this picture 20 years ago. He was running towards the Twin Towers of New York as the planes hit because his fiance or soon-to-be fiance was in there. So you obviously tell us that he loses his fiance, but now he's the president of the United States. So you had a leadership sort of role for him in your mind. Does that mirror how you look at leadership in the real world? Because I think if we look at politics, whether you're Republican, Democrat, whatever you label yourself, I think we can agree that leadership is missing. So in terms of writing, Jack, in the new book is The Devil's Hand, did you try to create this character based on kind of what you think a leader in politics could look like?
Well, kind of. And a lot of that is like, if this hadn't happened, if he hadn't had this catalyst that changed the course of his life, he certainly would not have been going into politics. He was a guy who was going to stay on this track in tech, in Silicon Valley. Just at the onset of a great time to be starting out in that part of the country and in that industry. So that's where he would have stayed. But for September 11th, and that changed the course of his life. So he's not that typical person that wanted power, that wanted control, that wanted to use their office to increase their or their family's standing in society. He was very happy to just be making money in Silicon Valley and to be adapting to a changing environment on that side of the house. And that was his path. And then September 11th hits, and that changes everything for him because he loses. And maybe if he didn't he's also somebody that maybe if his fiance wasn't in the Twin Towers, he'd still be in Silicon Valley. So it wasn't necessarily the event is that he lost the love of his life there. And that puts him on a different path. And that makes him a different type of politician because he's not there. He's there. You haven't got to the secret yet, but he's there for a specific reason. And so he changes course of his life in order to get to that position for a one specific reason. So he's not a typical politician, but you're right in that we certainly seem to be at a deficit for leaders. Like I don't think I can point to too many that I can have my kids. I would use as examples for my children. Say, hey, look at this politician here. This is somebody to emulate. If one day you can, if you do certain things, or if you want to go into public service, then you can end up here. Gosh, maybe I could count maybe 3 or 4, possibly. And even then it's like,
what do you look for, Jack, in a leadership quality? Like what types of characteristics stand out to you? Because again, part of being a Navy SEAL is that's what you learn. I mean, being a Navy SEAL, they obviously, this better than I do. They bust your butt physically and mentally, not just through buds, but constantly. Yeah. So it almost forces you into leadership, whether you wanted to be or not. So what can you take out of that? And if you looked at someone in Washington, a fake person, let's say, so we don't call anybody out, and said, okay, these are the characteristics I would love for my kids to look at someone and say, that is an amazing person.
Yeah. So everybody has a different experience with these sorts of things, but whether you're just a brand new guy and really are in quote unquote charge of nobody, you're still a leader. Because people can look to you no matter what. Doesn't matter rank or position or how much experience that you have. But for me in the military and in life in general, it's all about trust. So you're building trust with the people beneath you in the chain of command and above you in the chain of command. So every opportunity, every interaction, and I'll just use the military as an example, every interaction I had was an opportunity to continue to build and develop that trust. Everyone was an opportunity, whether it was passing somebody just in the hallway, or it was going out to run the obstacle course. And even more important, as you go up in rank, and maybe you have meetings and you have more administrative things you need to do, it's important to get out there with the tactical level guys and run that obstacle course and be near the front. Like, you can't go out there and fail. You don't have to be the first guy, as you work your way out, but you need to be up there near the front. And same thing on the range. You're doing these different shooting drills. You're doing stress courses. You're doing transition drills between your pistol and your rifle as you're moving, that sort of thing. As you get up there in rank, every one of these stress courses, and every time that whistle blows or whatever else, as you go and engage targets, each one of those is an opportunity to develop trust, because they're looking, they're watching. And once again, you don't have to be the best shot as you get older and get more rank and more responsibility, but you have to be up there near the top, and you have to give some young guys a run for their money. And so all of these things are ways to develop this camaraderie, develop this trust, and then up the chain of command, being able to clearly articulate the nature of the conflict in which we're engaged, what you're going to be doing downrange, your knowledge, your base of experience, whatever that is. It's all an opportunity to build trust so that they leave you alone and that they can focus on the problem children over here. So you're developing that trust up the chain of command, so they allow you that freedom of maneuver, whether it's in training or on the battlefield, to get the job done. So it's all about building trust regardless of position.
Now, you've gone from one of the most rely on everyone rely on you. It's an entire unit type of world to the most singular type of profession you can have in writing. How hard was that transition, knowing that I wake up every morning and someone's counting on me, I'm counting on them, to waking up every morning, I'm counting on me, and I've got to get this done for me?
I actually really like it. So yeah, it was a very good run in the SEAL teams, but you do feel that. You feel that each and every day. I still feel it today, but it's a responsibility to my family to continue to do everything I can as a father, as a husband. We have a special middle child with severe special needs that needs full-time care for life. So my next mission in life is making sure that he's going to be able to get taken care of long after I'm gone, and that responsibility doesn't fall to his brother and sister. So that I think about that. But my passion is writing, so I've combined these two things, and I think that's what's important. Is I listen to that calling to military service, particularly to special operations, and then listen to that calling to be an author and to write the kind of books that I was enjoying as a kid growing up, and continue to enjoy today as well. So all those things kind of came together for me. But now when I wake up, it's nice not knowing that when the phone rings, it's not always going to be bad news on the weekend. So in the military, if it's a weekend or you're whatever, and that phone rings and it's, let's say, 9 at night, 10 at night, midnight, and you see that phone ring from either somebody that's in your platoon or from the command number coming through, that it's probably not someone calling to tell you that everything's great. There's something happened. So it took a little while to get over that when the phone would ring, you always expect it to be bad. And for whatever reason, after 20 years of doing that, it stayed with me a little bit as I got out, and the phone would ring. And for a little bit, it was kind of like, oh, geez. But then the good news started coming in with these phone calls. Hey, Simon & Schuster wants to make your, wants to publish you. They want to do a 2-book deal out of the gate. And hey, Chris Pratt wants to option this for a film. Like, oh, wonderful. So the good news comes in more so than not these days. That, like, the expectation isn't that every time the phone rings that something horrible has happened, either in the United States in training or off duty for somebody that's in your platoon or your troop or overseas. So the expectation is a little bit different now, I guess, which is nice. So point being, it's nice to have it just be me and sitting here in front of the computer and using that experience, using that education I gave myself in the art of storytelling by all this reading I did growing up, all that academic study of warfare, all these experiences, and now it's just me and the computer. So I love that part of it. And I always thought, I guess I'm more of a introvert, and I kind of had to teach myself to be an extrovert in the military and whatever else, but much more comfortable just being in a cabin in the mountains with my computer, developing these stories.
And I guess that makes sense too, as far as the sniper goes, because snipers, we often, you're often by yourself or with a partner, and that's it. You guys are longer range away, and you're hiking up hills and doing whatever it is, top of buildings. And you have to be patient. And I think that's another skill that is very difficult in this modern world. So how do you find ways to slow down, Jack, so you can write?
Yeah, that's the tough part, especially now, because I thought writing was just living in that cabin, writing a book, sending it to New York, starting your next one. I didn't realize that you had to do all the things you would have to do starting any business. You have to do, I mean, you could rely on just your publisher and your publicist, but if you do that, you're probably going to be disappointed because they have limited resources. Even big companies like Simon & Schuster, they have limited resources and they have to allocate those resources in a way that makes sense for them. And in a lot of publishing, it's very similar to Hollywood in that the Avengers movies, they pay for everybody else. All those other films that maybe are up for Academy Awards for things that no one sees, guess what? They're not making like, guess who's making that money back for them? The Avengers. So same thing in publishing. Stephen King and John Grisham are making that money back for everybody else, and it's very rare to make your investment back for a publisher, particularly as a new author. And mine did, so I was very, very fortunate out of the gate to have these novels resonate with people and to make that money back, to prove that I was a good investment to them. So I thought that was it. But as I got closer to that first novel being published, I was like, oh, okay. I hear all these other authors complaining really about what their publisher's not doing. Guess what? I am not coming from a background in politics or sports or with any sort of a following. I haven't sold one book. So if they're probably not going to invest a lot of those resources in me right now. I got to prove that I was a good investment. And I continue to do that today, which means you got to figure out budgeting, you got to figure out marketing, you got to figure out advertising, you got to figure out social media, you got to figure out engagement. You got to do all those things that you would have to do if you started a coffee shop, no matter what it is.
You got to spend time with two knuckleheads like us.
That's a great part of it. I love talking to books. I love talking reading. That's one of my favorite things to talk about is about all these other authors that influenced me on my way up. So I love doing stuff like this. But you're right. It's all about building that readership, because if you don't, then you're not going to be able to do what you love, which is the writing part of it. So you have to build up that readership. And for me, you couldn't have done that 30 years ago. You couldn't have done that 40 years ago. You couldn't have done that in 1965, 75, 85, because these platforms didn't exist. You couldn't jump on a podcast. You couldn't start your own podcast. You couldn't engage with people and say thank you on social media when they say that, hey, I read your book and I gave it to my dad and he loved it, or, and I can write back and I can say, thank you so much. That means the world to me, because now these platforms do exist. You can do that. So I looked at it just like I would on the battlefield. I looked at things, that adaptability right there. So I'm looking to capitalize on momentum. I'm looking for gaps. I'm looking for all those things on the battlefield. Same thing. I'm aggressively solving problems because I looked at this space and I looked at other industries. Like why is my iPhone such a different experience than getting my old BlackBerry? Like whether you have this experience opening this box, they put just as much thought into that box as they did into the actual product inside. And that shows. And so I thought, well, when my books arrive to people, I'm going to have them come in some really cool branded packaging. I'm going to put a letter in there thanking them for reading it, and also make it easy to share, because it's something new, it's something different. But I got that from Apple. How does Red Bull launch a new drink? So whatever that is, I'm just doing the same things I did on the battlefield, but I'm doing them here. And if I mess something up, the consequences aren't nearly as dire. I can fix it. It's okay, especially with the writing. If I'm writing, same thing. I'm writing these novels and I get to aggressively solve problems on the page. But guess what? If I sleep on it and I think of a better way to do it, I can go back and I can fix that. So it's been a busy time. It's been a busy couple of years. That's for sure.
This is the Go Show. Thank you for being here. Joining us right now is Jack Carr. He is the author of the new book, The Devil's Hand. This is actually this is his fourth, not one, not two, not three, but four-time thriller. He is a former Navy SEAL sniper and a huge outdoorsman. Jack, real quick, just tell us about the book. Tell us about the evolution to this book, what it's about, and then we'll get into a little bit of the outdoor fun stuff.
Yes, this is a fourth novel in the series starring Navy SEAL sniper. And I say starring because I've been on the set in Hollywood all week with Chris Pratt portraying Navy SEAL sniper James Reese, with Antoine Fuqua directing, who's just an incredible person, by the way. They both are. It could not be in better hands. But Navy SEAL sniper James Reese. And when the reader meets him in the first novel, in the Terminal List, the one that they're filming right now, he's at that stage in his time in uniform when he's decided that, okay, I'm a lieutenant commander. I'm doing my troop commander tour. After this one, I'm not going to tactically lead guys on the battlefield anymore. And that's where I was when I came back from my last Iraq deployment and decided to get out. Took a breath, looked around, saw my family needed me. And I decided, okay, if I stay in, I'll come back as a commanding officer after some staff tour somewhere, which sounded awful. But a commanding officer sounds impressive, but in real life, in today's military, you are in a tactical operations center. You're allocating assets. You are a manager for the most part. So I thought time to move on, and that next calling in life that's writing. And I've wanted to do this since I was a little kid, just like I would say, feel that same passion for writing that I did to serve my country in uniform. And I was very cognizant that it was time to turn that page. There was no question whether it was time to stay in or get out. And of course, now everything shifts to the narrative. And the background of my protagonist was very similar to mine, but now in this fictional thriller, disaster strikes and of course propels the plot forward, and it becomes a story of revenge without constraint. And then by this fourth one, he's gone through an evolution. He thinks he's dying in this first novel, and it's not a spoiler alert because now there are 4. So
Not too soon. No.
So he moves on in True Believer into a story of redemption, and then into Savage Son, which is really explores the dark side of man through the dynamic of hunter and hunted, and then into this fourth one that really looks at our country from the enemy's point of view, and takes the lessons that they've learned by watching us in Iraq and Afghanistan and Syria and other hotspots around the world, and then to include how our response to COVID, civil unrest in our cities, contentious political season, and what lessons they took from all of that, and then apply to a battle plan where they strike. So it's all the novels build on one another, but they are standalone. And for the most part, this one is probably the most standalone of the 3 thus far. I'd recommend people go in order, but if they want to jump right into this one, it's probably the most of a standalone one because of the way that I deal with bringing that backstory into it at the beginning through an experience I had at the CIA when I was working for them years ago, as I was detailed over there for a little bit of time. And then I thought, I might come work for these guys. So I went through this lifestyle polygraph test thing, and I decided to stay in the military eventually, but I went through that poly, and I remember the experience, remember the feelings and emotions behind sitting in that chair for hours and then coming back the next day and doing it again. And then for this novel, I did a little research, and that's how I brought everybody up to speed. So it's a kind of a cool, I think it's on the website too. The first 3 chapters are on my website. People can go test drive there and see if they like it before drive
What
before
is that website?
you drive or whatever it is.
You're going to be here on Tuesday virtually.
That's right at Poison Pen in Scottsdale. Love that place. Yeah.
And what's the website then go to get those, to check out those first 3 chapters?
So they can go to officialjackcarr.com. They can hit any of the books on there, and there's some sort of a sample. Look at that right there. You can download the chapters or read the chapters. You listen to the audiobook, you can test that out as well on there for the first couple of chapters. And then all the different bookstores that I'm doing virtual events with are on that site as well. So they can click on Poison Pen there in Scottsdale, and they'll have signed books, and they'll have these book plates, limited edition book plates here that I do. And this is a very special Kalishnikov that I use and describe in the novel. That's like a character in and of itself. So that's on there. And that's to kind of give people an excuse to go to those independent bookstores rather than hitting the easy button on some other online book retailers. So I got to support those local independent bookstores.
Absolutely. And if you're watching on YouTube or Facebook right now, Rob is playing the role of Vanna White with a beer. So he'll show the book every now and again. So you can check that out.
Oh.
Jack, did you grow up an outdoorsman? Did you grow up hunting and fishing?
So I didn't grow up hunting. I always wanted to hunt with my dad. We grew up shooting and going to the range, shooting his old 22, an old pre-64 30-30, an old Colt Woodsman. We fly fished. We went into the backcountry on telemark skis, what would now be like AT skis, and backpacked. But we didn't hunt. But I always felt this drive, like I'm back there in the backcountry, and I always wanted that rifle. I felt this primal, I don't know, not need or desire, but it was just very natural for me to want to put food on the table. So when I got older, then I went all in on the hunting, and now I actually have a hunting operation in Lanai, Hawaii. So 4 of us are partners in there, and people can go on out, hunt axis deer and mouflon sheep, and stay in the Four Seasons Lanai. So it's a hunting destination for the whole family, depending on if one of the other spouse doesn't hunt, they can hang out by the pool and go to Nobu.
Sign me up.
You're sending us that information right now, right? You're listening.
It's called Pineapple Brothers Lanai, and it's a cool spot out there. There's been some like Rogan goes out there, and there's a butcher called Bob the Butcher that Rogan has made somewhat of a legend by talking about him so much on the podcast, and he is quite the character. It's worth going out there just to meet Bob the Butcher. I'll say that. I'll go out on a limb and say that it's not even a risk. He's quite the character. So. Okay. Destination.
Rob and I are we will make plans, and
My
I'm not
kind of hunting, Mike.
not
My
just
kind of
saying that
hunting.
because you're in front of us. We are talking about that. We're definitely going to see what we can do to make that happen. That is
New families too. It's definitely the way to go, because so many different hunting destinations. If somebody doesn't hunt, it's not that comfortable for the one that does not. But this is the opposite of that. This is much more comfortable for the person that does not hunt, and it's just a good time out there.
I'm all about that. Now tell me about your transition to I don't know if there's anything that's more full of badassery than being a SEAL sniper. So real quickly, your outdoor world and you kind of the evolution into hunting. How did that help you in that endeavor? Not to so much to become a SEAL, because I know that was a lifelong dream of yours, but when you were actually in battle, when you were actually serving, how much did your outdoor background play into that and help in your success?
Yeah, I think it was significant in that I've been very into not just being in shape for these sorts of things, and not just understanding the technical skills necessary to self-rescue on a glacier or whatever else that might be, but the gear involved, just what you need if you're going into the backcountry for a day versus going into the backcountry for a week, or in some cases a month or more. What kind of boots are going to withstand? What kind of support you need? And I was so shocked when I got to my first SEAL team, just how little most of I guess a lot of it's the people in supply that just got a catalog and just picked things that they thought looked good. And so I got to my first SEAL team in '97, and that's pretty much how it was. I remember they gave us these boots to go up to Kodiak, Alaska, which is our cold weather warfare training center. And they gave us these flimsy boots with like 0 ankle support and these gigantic packs. And so you're not just going into the backcountry there with what you would do if we were just going on a backpacking trip. It's not a sleeping bag and a tent and a stove and some freeze-dried food. No, there's a gigantic radio that's built around batteries that are like 2 huge batteries, 5590s, that are this big. So the size of the radio, although they do more, the size has really stayed the same since World War II. Like it's crazy. The same size as the guys wearing in Vietnam. Well, the radio is the same size, but it does a lot more. So I think because somebody has a contract with these batteries, I think it's a conspiracy. So they're all built around the size of these gigantic batteries because so-and-so has a family member that runs the battery company, and that's probably true.
Write that in the next novel. That's in the next novel.
I should research that to make sure I'm not just spouting off, but it sounds like it's true. So I'm going with it. So yeah, we get. You'd see that and be like, oh my gosh. So I had this background where I knew all this gear. I tested all this gear out growing up because I was always about going into the backcountry further and faster than I had the time before. I mean, I remember going from external frame to internal frame packs in about 1987, 88, whenever that was. I remember my first Dana Design pack. I still have it. So I remember that transition. I remember this going and finding, your Nalgene water bottles and then Wispite stoves. Oh my goodness. So all these things that allowed you to go further and faster into the back. So it's always a part of me. And when you're doing that, you're pushing yourself. So when you have those skis on and you got skins on and you're heading up on your telemark skis over, whatever that is, and you have this pack on and a storm's coming in and you need to figure out where you're going to sleep. Are you building a snow cave and you're spending to wait out this storm and then get out the next day or whatever? You're adapting. You're making decisions that have life and death consequences in many cases, and you're pushing yourself. You're at altitude. You're moving into the backcountry, and that's tough. So when I'm under the boat at Buds, I'm thinking about these things. I'm thinking about the trail runs that I did growing up. I'm thinking about the jiu-jitsu that I did and the boxing that I did, because some of those things, like I thought a lot about jiu-jitsu actually. When you're on that mat and they're sending through other students that are fresh, and you're going for like 5 minutes with each one, another 5 minutes with somebody fresh, another 5 minutes, and you're on that mat for like an hour. That's tough. In some cases longer than an hour. So I thought about all those experiences, but even more than that, I thought about the guys who had stormed the beaches at Normandy, Iwo Jima. And as I'm doing push-ups in the sand in Southern California, I'm like, hey, you know what? I'm not waiting for this landing craft door to fall and take machine gun fire from an elevated position with no cover between me and the base of a cliff. And those guys did that. They did that so that I could have these options and opportunities that I have today, so that I could be here on this beach in sunny Southern California, getting sand kicked in my face and told I'm no good, and all the rest of the things that they do in the military on your path. I said, you know what? These guys sacrificed everything so I could do this, and that really helped put things in perspective for me.
You got to check him out. Jack Carr, his latest novel is, Rob's going to put it up here like Vanna White. That's right. The Devil's Hand. He's going to be at the Poison Pen in Scottsdale virtually on Tuesday. You got to check him out. And we look forward to talking to you more in the future. I definitely want to talk to you about, next time we chat, I want to talk to you about introduction to long range shooting. Being a sniper, I think you're the pro there. So best of luck with the book. Get the book. If you're a book on the audiobook kind of person or a hardback kind of person, it's available both ways. Get over to the official jackcarr.com and find the first 3 chapters, and we'll see you next week right here on the Go Show.
Awesome. Thanks for having me on.
Hey man, we appreciate it. And I knew nothing about this Hawaiian hunting thing you have going on. Are you in Hawaii right now?
No, I'm not in Hawaii right now. I'm in Park City. But yeah, I need my family's in Hawaii. I sent them out for book week because otherwise all they see is me like going to and from the fridge, getting a snack, coming in here. Boxes in this room. I mean, it's crazy. The other room, it's chaos. And so I'm like, you guys need to just go and have a good time. So I'm here. They're over there.
Yeah, and I'm not kidding. We will try to make that happen. I would absolutely love nothing more than to do that.
And our wives would too. They would love it too.
Yeah, exactly. That's why it's so unique in the hunting space. And,
getting that cleared by the War Department, easy breezy. That's not a big deal.
There we go. Yeah, Pineapple Brothers, and then really it's a high adventure company that does all our bookings, and they have so there's 2 websites for it. One's High Adventure Company with a bunch of other things on there, and one's Pineapple Brothers Lanai that I think if you click on it, just takes you to High Adventure Company. But yeah, it's pretty cool spot out there. Pretty special.
Jack, we super appreciate it, man. Good luck with the book. I'm excited because I needed a new author, so I'm excited to get introduced to you. Nice. I'm already in. I'm on chapter 6, so
awesome.
I'm ready to go.
Awesome. And I'm very excited that it's available on audio too. So
cool. Yeah, people love the audio. Ray Porter crushes it, so people love that. So,
nice.
Right on, man.
Thank you.
Hey, appreciate it, man. Best of luck, and hopefully we can chat soon. If you're ever in town, look us up. We got a great hunt club up the road too, so you can come on out and have some fun with some upland hunting.
Awesome, love it. All right, guys, take care. Thanks for everything,
Jack. So much.
All right, thanks, man. Appreciate it.
Bye.